Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm awesome. Today I am here with my good friend Michelle, and a little bit about Michelle and how we met. We went through yoga teacher training together, our 200-hour with balanced yoga and wellness, Courtney Butler's program here in North Little Rock, Arkansas. And that's how I first met Michelle. And she's just the most caring, grounding soul ever. She managed a studio in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and took it to new heights. She brought me on board teaching there, and we have a lot of fun together. We go for a lot of long walks and talk about yoga and life, and so I wanted her to be my first guest. So without further ado, Michelle, take it away.
All right. Let's see what happens here. So as she said, I'm Michelle. I am 33 years old, and I started practicing yoga when I was about 15-ish. It's kind of a rough guesstimate. And all I remember about finding yoga is that I was at Sam's with my mom because I used to like to go to Sam's with her because I wanted the free samples. And there was this video, and like I had tried to like do different things as far as like sports and cheerleading or whatever, like extracurriculars, but like I wasn't athletic. I was actually kind of like clumsy and wasn't coordinated. I had a lot, like I just struggled with those kind of things. So like as much as I wanted to be involved in some kind of extracurricular, extra something, I couldn't find anything that I was quote unquote good at. I randomly found some, I'm 99% sure it was Rodney Yee DVD, and was like, Mom, can I get this? And she was like, okay, sure, you want? And so I would do yoga in my room by myself, and just this one DVD over and over and over again. And I kind of came in and out of it because again, I was 15 and then I was 16, so I got a car and and for years I just kind of, again, the one DVD until I was like in my 20s, the one DVD over and over again in my room, on and off. Like there would be time periods where I would do it like every day and time periods I would stop altogether, and so it just kind of depended on what was going on in life, I guess. So in my mid-ish 20s, I started going to a yoga class at the Little Rock Climbing Center. I used to climb there often, loved the place, found out that they were doing a yoga class, and I had some friends that we were all climbing together, and so the husbands would climb while the wives went and did yoga. And for some reason, I had it in my head that I was like, I should go get a yoga training. Now, I say I went originally because I wanted to just learn more about the practice and learn more about the alignment. My husband will tell you that I always went in to teach, which I don't recall that, but I'm not going to 100% discount that because who knows what I said to get him to agree to let me do it. Because I was like, hey, can I spend this money to be a teacher? And I had some, so the climbing gym had different teachers that would show up at different times, and there were some that I really liked, some that I had some less than favorable experiences with. Got adjusted by a male teacher there that I was really uncomfortable with how it happened, and but wasn't quite brave enough to be like, hey, like don't do that. It was one of those moments of are you supposed to adjust that way? Like, I don't know. I'm not a yoga teacher. But what happened was, so that everybody knows like what the adjustment was, I was in down dog and he came up behind me and he grabbed my hips and he put his knees in the back of my knees and told me to soften my knees as he pulled my hips back towards him. And yeah, if you know anything about anatomy and where those things went, like that's what I was like, oh, I don't know if this is how. Later, I found out you probably shouldn't adjust people that way. I really think that adjustment was innocent on his part, but in the moment, it was very uncomfortable, confusing. Anyways, so with that being said, I was like, I want to learn more about yoga. I want to learn more about the alignment and the postures and the philosophy. And up until this point, I had only had a physical practice. I've never had delved into any kind of meditation practice. Tried to sit like quietly sometimes, but I'm not good at sitting still. I'm always involved and busy with something. I usually have something to fidget with because I can't sit still. So meditation was never my thing. So my husband, he wasn't my husband at the time. We were been together a long time, and you know, financials were intertangled, and he agreed to let me spend the money to be a yoga teacher. And the way I found the training is I literally Googled like yoga teacher trainings in Central Arkansas and looked at the credentials of the people involved in the schools. I didn't know the teacher that I had been practicing with had a school. I didn't know anything about it, but I didn't actually end up going to that school. I went to Balance Yoga and Wellness. And up until that point, I had never been in a studio ever. So I'd been practicing since I was 15. This is like mid to late 20s. I finally stepped foot into a studio. And I remember my very first day, I walked into the studio and a lady looked at me and she goes, "Are you here for yoga teacher training?" And I was like, I don't know that I want to admit this, but yes. And she's like, "Welcome," and gives me this big hug. And it was this huge like to do, which kind of freaked me out because I don't like being the center of attention and I don't like being hugged. So during my teacher training, I did meet Melissa, and I met a lot of people that I've crossed paths with them in different moments and stuff since then, and it was interesting to watch everybody's life evolve during that training. There was an agreement between the school and the studio on practicing hours and assisting hours and stuff like that. And I knew that I was allowed to be at the studio to observe as much as I wanted, and nobody was ever going to say anything to me. And I don't remember what the agreement was. I don't remember if we were allowed to practice for free or we could for so much, or it was there was a certain amount that like was involved with the school. But I was up there literally every single day. I was up there watching and observing, taking notes, asking questions, and I was just really involved in learning and having this experience and understanding. And I wanted to be good at what I did, and I wanted to know more. And about halfway through teacher training is when I decided that, oh, maybe I do want to teach. Again, my husband will discount and say that I wanted to teach all along. Because I don't like being in front of people, so I don't see why that would have been where I was going with it. Anyways, that's irrelevant. So at one point I decided that I did want to teach, that I wanted to be part of this community, and I wanted to give back in the ways that I had. I was offered a teaching job probably about midway through my training at a studio that was literally like 45 minutes away from my house. And I took it, and I taught there for a while because I wanted to teach so bad. And I knew that like most places weren't going to let you teach until you finished. And I was like, well, this will be an amazing experience. And like, it's so far away that like, if I mess up too bad, nobody will really know my name. So I drove 45 minutes away. I want to say it was like twice a week, maybe like Tuesday, Thursday or something like that for a while. And then I decided that there weren't enough people showing up to the class. The amount of money I was getting paid wasn't worth it because of how far I was driving. And at the time I worked nights. So what was happening was I was getting up super early, driving to go teach this class, driving back, going to work, working all night. So it was a lot. It was a lot. So as time went on and I delved in more and got more involved with the studio, I eventually, when I finished my training, got hired on to teach there. I honestly don't remember how many classes on the front end. I probably one because that's where most people start, but I did start teaching there immediately after my teacher training. Loved it, enjoyed it, was really excited about what I had learned, what I was giving to people, and people who watched me start from like not knowing how to call a class at all to me being one of their favorite teachers. And I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. It's just one of those things that people were like, oh, I love your classes so much. And I was always like, who, me? Like, who am I to? Anyway, so people that really cheered me on and watched me evolve, like, were very encouraging through that whole time. Well, as more things evolved and life happened, not with just me, but with other people, I got more and more involved with the studio to the point that I eventually left my full-time job to teach full-time. And nothing something like that, like I had never dreamed of it in my life before, like, oh, I'm going to work as an independent contractor and that's going to be my job. It was, you know, I worked in mental health for years before this and just kind of assumed that I would be punching a clock the rest of my life. I accidentally fell into management, and it was just because I was so involved in everything and I was so enthralled with all of it and the comings and goings. And if I wasn't teaching, I was practicing, and I was just there so much. It was just kind of a natural progression. Like, you know, well, she's here all the time anyway. And it was one of those, like, I remember the day that somebody goes, well, you're the manager. I was like, since when? Like, how did that happen? Nobody told me. So it wasn't anything that like, oh, there's a management position at this studio, I should apply. It literally was just something that evolved and happened. So when I transitioned into teaching full time, for those of you that are expecting to become a yoga teacher and get rich, not a good plan. So I took a second job working with horses because I came from mental health, which paid decently. And it's not that I'm after the financials or after the money. It had more to do with survival. Like, I needed to pay my bills. I had a mortgage. In this time frame, I had gotten engaged and got married, and, you know, just life happens and life requires money. And I needed a little more money than what I was making just teaching yoga. Because again, it's not a get rich system at all. Like, you've got to do it because you love it, and maybe you teach to support your yoga clothes habit. I don't really know. So I took a second job working with horses, which again was one of those things that, like, I went into that fully with the expectation of just like, I'm going to feed horses twice a week and that's going to be it, which slowly evolved into, I work at the barn 30 to 40 hours a week, and I'm a barn manager, and I'm managing a yoga studio, and I just kind of, my husband likes to say that whatever I do, I go in full force and just kind of take over, and that's my personality. And so every time I do anything that he wants me to just kind of like do a little bit, he'll be like, okay, don't do what you always do. So, as you can imagine, managing a studio, managing a barn, all of that is a lot to take on for one person. It wasn't something that I felt was too much, though. Like, I was doing well. But then the yoga studio kind of evolved in what was happening there. And there were a lot of things that were taking place that didn't sit well with me all the time. And I was constantly being called in, being asked, like, where were my passions? Where did I want to be? Where was my attention? What was I wanting out of this? And eventually it turned into that we decided it was best for me to step down as the manager and to just be teaching for a while. So I went from managing the studio to just teaching. I was still teaching the same number of classes, which was several days a week, several classes a day. I still taught a lot, and I taught some outside of the studio. And I was still working at the barn full time. And so fast forward a little bit, I just kind of lived that life for a while. And then my husband got orders for us to move because he's military. And so we moved out of the country. And I found myself finding a little bit of relief, not just from the yoga studio, but also from what I was dealing with in all aspects of my life. It was one of those, like, as much as I was sad and disheartened to leave my family and have to pick up my entire life and move, there was this sense of peace in the sense that I was going to have a clean out from all these things that were stressing me out and starting to really sit with me, not a way that I was appreciating. And I know this sounds like a disheartening story that, like, oh, I went through this whole yoga thing and I loved it so much, and then I was in this place of discontent when we moved. And so originally when I had gotten my training, the logic behind it was always that if we moved, I would be able to teach anywhere because the Yoga Alliance certification moved around with me. When we got to our overseas station, I did attempt to find a teaching job pretty quickly. And part of it was challenging, but the other part of it I made excuses about because I found that I didn't want to teach anymore. I found that I was a little salty about the whole system, and I don't know if that came from teaching too much or from things that I was experiencing, but it was all one of those things that I made a lot of excuses on why I couldn't teach while we were here. Now, don't get me wrong, there were a lot of blockades up as well. Like, the insurance is crazy high overseas and they don't want to pay that much, and there's a lot, but I also made a lot of excuses, and I kept thinking, well, maybe if I do it this way, maybe if I do it that way. I ended up volunteer teaching for one of the programs on the military base where we were at. But then I found myself before classes praying that nobody would show up because I didn't want to teach. I didn't want anybody to show up. And for the most part, people didn't, which, you know, had a lot to do with what I was putting in the universe. But occasionally some people would. And I'm just going to hope the person who runs the program doesn't ever hear this. But there was one time that, like, the students were late, so it wasn't fully on me, but I did see them, and I was like, nope, they're late, and I just walked. I didn't turn around. I didn't say anything. I just walked because I didn't want to teach. And that was sad too. It was, because I had spent so much of my life and so many hours teaching and so many hours learning and all these trainings, and I have more trainings on top of just the 200-hour. So it was a struggle internally. So I was like, okay, well, I'll register a school and I'll do a school. And maybe that will kind of reignite my passion for yoga because I would help people find theirs. And I kept putting feelers out. And the first time I put feelers out, I had massive attention to it. And I'm talking about like where we were overseas. Like, I had a list of like 80 people who were like, yeah, I want to be trained. And I was like, okay, well, this is it. But then I couldn't get anybody to commit. Nobody wanted to commit. And it wasn't that it was too expensive. I actually priced it kind of on the low end because I was like, I don't fully know what I'm doing. And I can't expect them to pay $2,500 for somebody who's never even done this on their own. So I never got anybody to commit. I never ended up doing a teacher training yet. So I took that as a sign that, like, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing right now, and that I needed to take a step back. I was still volunteer teaching the class at the program on base, and I was only agreeing to it because I know I needed teaching hours to keep my certification current with Yoga Alliance. So I kept doing it and showing up. And I mean, it was one of those that I wouldn't try to call the class to order. I would let them just goof off at the front end to waste time. And they couldn't be mad because I'm volunteering. Like, that's, this sounds so bad. So then COVID happened, and it was my out. I didn't have to teach anymore. I didn't have to do any of it anymore. I got to step away. I got to step back and really evaluate what was going on. As much as this doesn't seem part of it, it is. When we moved, so we've been overseas now for a little over a year, and when we moved, it really hit me hard as far as like just every part of my life. And I was in this really dark place, very depressed, very sad. Spent a lot of time just on the couch, just trying to survive each day, and spent most of my days just praying that God would send us back. And I don't think a lot of people want to admit that that's how they respond to their orders, but that is how I responded and how several people I've encountered responded. So probably, let's see, it's almost August, June, late May, early June, I really started doing a lot of self-work. And with that was a very deep meditation practice where I spend a good portion of my day in meditation of some form. That was me trying to heal myself from the trauma of everything that I had been through up until this point, me trying to reconnect with all the aspects of my life that I loved before, which included yoga. And as much as I had this salty, bitter taste in my mouth about it, I was trying to remember the good pieces and not the pieces that made me upset. And probably I started doing some yoga videos and posting them online, and then that turned into more of a self thing. Like, I don't like seeing myself on camera. I don't like the sound of my voice. I didn't want to do that. And so I struggled with the videos. And I have a friend here who has been very encouraging and very helpful. And she and I have actually been practicing a little bit together, about twice a week. And not that we've been doing it very long, but it is starting to reignite my drive and my enjoyment out of it, because now it's back to, I'm doing it with friends, and it's community time for her and I to spend together. And even though it's just the two of us, and it's not like a traditional yoga class, because like I make us laugh and we tell stories to each other, but it is definitely reconnecting me to that. And then with me trying to do the self work, I have moved into a very strong, very heavy, very deep meditation practice, just trying to heal, because it's been hard, and it's still hard. And I'm not saying that like, oh, I'm all better now, everything's great. It's still hard, and every day comes with different challenges, and being overseas is challenging for people. And we don't see that side of any of it. We don't see the side of the people that are struggling through all of this. They're just the people that, we see the happy people in the yoga videos and the happy people doing their practices, and we don't see the parts of the hard parts, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I am currently trying to pull myself out of the hard part and out of the saltiness for the asana practice. And thank you to my meditation practice with Melissa's help and coaching, I'm starting to get there. And that's kind of my yoga story.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I appreciate how vulnerable you've been, and I think so much of what you shared is going to resonate with a lot of yoga teachers. The burnout is real, and I love how you shared your hope of how you're connecting back to that place that brought you to the mat to begin with. Thank you again so much. I can't wait for everybody to hear this. I look forward to our next session, because I know we're going to have one again.
Okay.